A millionaire reunites with his fiancée, whom he abandoned years ago, now with 4 children. Determined to prove a point, he takes her to court, but he never expected the shocking truth that awaited him. Lucas had always had an immense desire to succeed in life. From a young age, he learned that to achieve his dreams, he would need to give his best and be willing to make sacrifices. Coming from a humble family, he worked hard to build his career, putting in countless hours of work and dedication into every project. The success he had longed for started to seem within reach, but as determined as he was to reach his goal, Lucas also had someone special in his life. Laura, his fiancée, a woman who was his safe harbor, his partner in every moment. Laura was the opposite of Lucas in many ways. While he was ambitious and career-focused, she was calm and cherished the simplicity of life. For Laura, the most important thing was the love they shared, the future they could build together. She dreamed of a life by Lucas's side, filled with peaceful moments, a home full of laughter, and maybe even a family to complete the life they envisioned. They shared a deep bond, and Laura always believed that their love was enough to overcome any obstacle they might face. Then one day, Lucas received an offer that would change everything. It was a job opportunity with a large company abroad, something he never thought would come so soon in his life. This was the kind of offer he knew could change his destiny forever, opening doors to a prestigious career, where he'd gain the recognition and financial stability he had always dreamed of. He knew that accepting meant taking a huge leap in his career, a unique opportunity to reach the next level and finally achieve the success he had pursued for so long. However, there was a problem that weighed on his heart: Laura. Accepting this offer meant leaving everything behind, including the relationship he valued so much. It meant leaving Laura waiting, with no guarantee that he'd return or that things would be the same afterward. Lucas tried to convince himself that it would only be temporary, that they could reunite soon and that everything would go back to normal once he felt fulfilled. But deep down, he knew this decision would put an unbearable strain on their relationship. In the nights that followed, Lucas couldn't sleep well. He thought about everything he had built with Laura, the plans and promises they had made, the small memories they shared. He found himself in a true dilemma. On one hand was the dream he had carried for so long, and on the other, the woman who made it all worthwhile. It was as if he were torn between love and ambition, as if he had to choose between the warmth of Laura's love and the thrill of success. He even tried talking to Laura about the offer, but he found a reaction in her that was different from what he expected. She supported him in everything, but for the first time, he saw a glint of fear in her eyes, a fear that this trip would not just be a pause in their lives but the beginning of the end. Laura didn't want to pressure him, didn't want to stand in the way of Lucas's dreams, but she couldn't hide the sadness of knowing he might choose something else over choosing the two of them. In the end, Lucas made the decision that felt right to him. He chose to accept the offer and follow his dream, convinced that he was doing what was best for both of their futures. He said goodbye to Laura with a tight hug, promising he'd be back soon. But as he turned his back to her, a heaviness in his chest warned him that this farewell might be the beginning of a separation deeper than he could imagine. The decision to accept the offer was already made, but as each day brought him closer to his departure date, Lucas felt the weight grow heavier. He tried to convince himself he was doing the right thing, that his love for Laura was strong enough to withstand any distance. Yet, at the same time, something inside him seemed to resist the idea of a long-distance relationship. He wanted to be completely focused on this new chapter in his life, free from distractions, free from worries, and painful as it was to admit, he began to see his relationship with Laura as an anchor that would hold him back, keeping him from soaring high. One night, when the tension became unbearable, Lucas decided he had to resolve things once and for all. He asked Laura for a serious conversation, and when she saw how tense he was, she sensed that something bad was coming. With a heavy heart, she listened to Lucas suggest that it might be best if they broke up. He spoke about the opportunity, about the need to focus on his future, and about how difficult the distance would be for both of them. Laura tried to argue, saying she loved him and was willing to wait, but Lucas was resolute. He believed that, in time, she would understand. As he spoke, he avoided looking into her eyes, as if meeting her pain might make him change his mind. Laura, on the other hand, was in disbelief. At one point, she tried to hold his hand, but Lucas pulled away, making it clear his decision was final. She then realized he had truly chosen his path, one that no longer included her. She felt a deep emptiness open up inside, as though all the promises and dreams they had built together were being torn apart right in front of her. When he walked out the door, Laura broke down in tears, feeling betrayed and abandoned. She couldn't understand how someone who claimed to love her could simply turn his back on everything they had built together. But for Lucas, there was a cold logic to it. He believed he was choosing the right path, that this was the price of success. Convinced that one day he might find Laura again, he thought perhaps fate would bring them back together when they were both ready. After Lucas left, Laura felt as if the world around her had lost its colors. Each day became monotonous, heavier than the last. The pain of his absence ran deep, and the feeling of abandonment stayed with her at every moment. The house that had once been full of dreams and plans now felt empty, almost cold. She felt lost, uncertain of how to move forward. Then, weeks after the separation, Laura began to notice subtle changes in her body. At first, she ignored the signs, thinking they were just the effects of stress and sadness. But something inside whispered that there was more to these symptoms. In a moment of courage, she decided to take a pregnancy test, with little hope. When the result came back positive, Laura was shocked. Pregnant. The impact of the discovery made the ground vanish beneath her feet. The news brought a mix of emotions: surprise, fear, and strangely, a hint of happiness. The reality, however, was harsh. Laura knew she was alone and that Lucas wouldn't return. From that moment on, she would have to be strong for two, no for three. So she resolved to do everything she could to give her baby a life full of love, even if she was still healing from a broken heart. The following months were challenging. Laura faced the nausea and pains of pregnancy without anyone by her side for a comforting hug or a kind word. But she found strength she didn't know she had. With each heartbeat she heard at her checkups, she felt renewed, as if this little being were the reason to keep going. She started working more, saving, and planning every detail for the baby's arrival, convinced she could face any challenge. When the day of the birth finally arrived, Laura received another surprise. She wasn't expecting just one baby but 4 quadruplets. The news was a shock, and for a moment, Laura felt a mix of panic and joy. It was a challenge greater than she had ever imagined, but when she saw each of her children's faces, all her doubts vanished. These little beings depended entirely on her, and at the same time, they were the ones making her stronger. In the years that followed, Laura devoted every second to caring for her children. She learned to manage sleepless nights, diapers, cries, and first words. Her house, which once felt empty, was now filled with laughter, chaos, and love. Each child had their own personality, and she watched them grow with a mix of pride and affection. Despite financial difficulties and exhaustion, Laura remained steadfast. To her children, Laura was everything: mother, father, protector, and friend. She never let them feel a lack of anything, and although her life was challenging, it was also full of love and purpose. And through it all, Laura rediscovered a version of herself she had never known: a strong, determined woman, capable of facing any storm for those she loved. When Laura entered the delivery room, she was expecting to see the face of her baby, the one she had imagined countless times as she felt it grow inside her. However, when she heard the doctor announce that it wasn't just one, but 4 babies, a mix of surprise and fear washed over her. She could barely process the information: quadruplets. Amid the exhaustion of labor, Laura tried to understand how this was even possible, but as soon as she heard the first cry, followed by another, and then another, reality set in. Right there before her were 4 little miracles. Holding the babies for the first time, Laura felt an inexplicable strength take over her. Their curious eyes, tiny hands that moved, and the soft sighs of the newborns made the world stand still. In each of them, she saw a new reason to keep going, a lifetime of love that depended solely on her. That moment transformed her completely. Somehow, Laura knew that, despite all the challenges, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The arrival of the quadruplets brought challenges Laura had never imagined. The nights were long and sleepless, as there was always someone crying or needing attention. Changing 4 diapers, feeding 4 mouths, cradling 4 small bodies, everything seemed like an impossible task. But Laura, with a resilience that even surprised herself, found ways to organize the chaos. She created a routine, a system where every minute counted, and learned to celebrate each small milestone her children achieved, like their first smiles, first words, and each one's first steps. However, the challenges weren't just physical. Raising 4 children alone demanded more than she had in terms of time and money. Every trip to the grocery store made Laura think about stretching her budget, doing quick mental math, and choosing only the essentials. She learned to be resourceful so that her children would lack nothing, even if it meant sacrificing her own needs. She would sew her own clothes, cook everything at home, and save every penny to give the children a dignified and comfortable life. Despite the exhaustion and financial limitations, Laura's home was filled with love. The laughter of the quadruplets echoed in every corner, and the curious, innocent eyes watching her each day gave her unshakable motivation. She knew that, despite the hardships, she was building a family full of affection. Every moment with them was a gift, and Laura felt blessed to have been chosen to be the mother of those 4 little ones. As the years passed, she began to see unique traits in each of them, little personalities that gradually revealed themselves. There was the quiet one, always observing the world intently, and the playful one who made everyone laugh. There was also the fearless one, always curious and eager to explore, and the affectionate one, who loved a tight hug. Laura felt that, together, they formed a true team, a small family filled with love, unity, and companionship. In her children, Laura found the courage and purpose she could never have imagined before. She, who once felt empty and alone, was now complete. Lucas was living the peak of his career. His decision to leave everything behind and focus entirely on his success had yielded rewards beyond his wildest dreams. In just a few years, he had built an enviable career abroad, earning both recognition and wealth. It was the kind of life he had envisioned since his youth. He owned luxurious properties, drove imported cars, traveled to exotic destinations, and attended prestigious events alongside the biggest names in the business world. His peers respected him, some even envied his success. He had become a symbol of someone who had made it, someone who had given up everything to carve out a place for himself and had triumphed. But despite achieving everything he had ever wanted, Lucas discovered that success didn't bring the fulfillment he had imagined. At first, he kept himself busy with new projects and goals, pushing away any inner discomfort. However, as the years went by, he began to notice an emptiness growing within him. He would return home, to a massive but silent mansion, and feel increasingly bothered by a loneliness that gnawed at him. Even at events, surrounded by people, he felt isolated, as if there was an invisible barrier between him and the world. He had fame and fortune, but what he lacked was someone by his side, someone who would be there for him beyond appearances. In quiet moments, when the hustle of work gave way to the stillness of night, Lucas found himself thinking about Laura. He wondered what had become of her and whether she had found the happiness he had left behind. Yet, at the same time, he tried to push these memories away, convincing himself he had made the right choice, that he had to let go of certain things to achieve success. But the memories came back like a persistent shadow, bringing with them a sense of regret he didn't want to acknowledge. Lucas began to question the true value of all he had achieved. He found himself surrounded by people who admired him but also wanted something from him. There was no authenticity in the relationships he cultivated. Everything was superficial, based on status and appearances. When he attended events and saw other couples, he felt a pang of envy, a longing to have someone real by his side. The ambition that once drove him forward now seemed like a trap, keeping him locked in an empty life. He realized that, in pursuit of an idealized version of happiness, he had left behind something far deeper and more genuine. This restlessness became harder and harder to ignore. No matter how much Lucas tried to immerse himself in new business ventures or dive into new projects, nothing seemed to fill that void. He bought things, traveled, met new people, but nothing truly touched him. He started to realize that while his bank account grew richer, his personal life grew poorer. And even if he couldn't say it out loud, he knew that the success he had achieved came at too high a price. Lucas, the man who once thought himself invincible, now found himself with a fortune, but without a real home, without a family, without the genuine love he had once found in Laura. Years had passed since Lucas and Laura last saw each other, but he never imagined he would see her again in the way he did. At a major public event, Lucas was moving through a crowd of influential people, greeting acquaintances and exchanging quick words about business. It was just another event on the calendar where he played his role as a successful businessman, but his mind was elsewhere. Lately, he had felt increasingly restless, as if something essential was always out of reach. While scanning the crowd, something caught his attention. Among so many people, he spotted a familiar face, a face that made his heart race, as if all the years and experiences had vanished, transporting him to another time. It was Laura. She was right there, beautiful and calm, with a glow he couldn't quite describe. She seemed even more radiant than he remembered, with a lightness that stirred a mix of surprise and regret in him. But what truly stunned him were the 4 children by her side. They were laughing, running around her, each with features that suddenly felt too familiar to be a coincidence. Lucas froze. His eyes moved between Laura and the children, trying to grasp what was happening. Each of those little faces bore something of him, A smile, the shape of the eyes, even the way they walked. The realization hit him like a shock. They were his children. The weight of the discovery left him speechless. He felt the ground vanish beneath his feet as the world around him seemed to go silent. Lucas stood there, watching Laura with those 4 children, and a whirlwind of emotions overtook him. Surprise, of course. But also anguish, regret, and a deep sadness. How could he have gone on with his life without knowing he had a family? How could he have ignored that by leaving Laura, he was leaving behind something much greater than he had ever imagined? Laura looked happy, independent, and confident, surrounded by her children's affection. He watched her play with them, bend down to tuck a strand of hair behind one of the children's ears, smiling with a tenderness he could barely recall. Realizing that she had moved on, raised those children without him, and found a peace that all his wealth could not buy felt like a stab to the heart. And at the same time, this unexpected encounter rekindled within him the desire to reconnect, to repair everything he had left behind. But he didn't know how to approach her. Part of him wanted to rush over to Laura, explain himself, ask for forgiveness, tell her he had never known about the children's existence. He wanted to be a part of that life, of that circle of love and joy he had abandoned in pursuit of a dream that now felt hollow. Yet another part, the harder and prouder side, told him he had no right to intrude in her life, that it might be too late to try to fix the past. Laura, busy with the children, still hadn't noticed his presence. And as Lucas watched the scene, her with the children, the laughter, the warmth that surrounded them, he felt, for the first time in years, truly alone. After that unexpected encounter, Lucas couldn't think about anything else. Laura's face and the children's faces, the way they seemed so happy by his side, all of it was imprinted in his mind. He needed to understand what had happened. He needed to know why Laura had never reached out to tell him he had children. The questions haunted him day and night, and he felt torn between the longing for what he had left behind and the indignation of being kept in the dark about something so important. Determined to resolve this, Lucas gathered the courage and went to meet Laura. He found her again in a park, with the 4 kids playing around her. He approached cautiously, trying to appear calm, but Laura noticed his presence before he could say anything. When she saw him, her expression changed. She became serious, almost cold, and immediately stepped away from the kids, gesturing for him to follow her for a private conversation. Lucas began to speak, trying to convey his confusion and frustration. He wanted to understand why he had never known about the children's existence, why she had kept this secret for so long. Laura listened in silence, but her gaze reflected a mix of hurt and exhaustion. When he finally finished, she took a deep breath and replied with the firmness of someone who had overcome a lot on her own. "Lucas, you left without looking back," she said in a calm but resentful voice. "You made the decision to move on with your life without even considering what might happen to me. And when I found out I was pregnant, it was already clear to me that there was no place for us in your life. I became a mother alone and raised our children without expecting anything from you, because I knew your world was elsewhere. I didn't hide anything from you, you just weren't there." Her words were a blow to Lucas. He tried to find a justification, a way to defend himself, but he knew deep down that she was right. He had chosen to leave, thinking he could reconnect with Laura whenever it was convenient. But he had never imagined the impact of that choice, the consequences it would bring. Still, he felt that as their father, he had the right to be part of the children's lives, even if it was late. However, when he expressed this, Laura was direct. She told him that those children already had a stable, happy life, and that he had no right to show up out of nowhere and cause disruption. "They don't know you, Lucas," she stated. "And I won't let them be confused or hurt. I did my best to make sure they grew up in a peaceful, loving environment, and I don't want anything to change that now." Feeling powerless and at the same time betrayed, Lucas left that meeting determined to seek his rights. He believed that he was their father and that, regardless of the choices he had made in the past, he had the right to get close to his children. So he decided to take the case to court, hoping that the law would allow him to be part of the children's lives. He knew he was stepping onto an uncertain and painful path, but he felt it was his only chance to have some connection with the children he never knew he had. For him, it was a matter of justice. But deep down, it was also an attempt to fill the emptiness that was consuming him. Lucas's decision to take the case to court was like throwing a stone into a still pond. In no time, the case took on massive proportions, attracting media attention and dividing public opinion. Newspapers and TV programs began covering every detail of the legal battle, with headlines exploring the drama between the wealthy businessman and the single mother fighting to keep her family together. The dispute quickly became public, and so, the story of Lucas and Laura was exposed for everyone to see. With his connections and financial resources, Lucas hired the best lawyers. His defense team painted a picture of regret and change, presenting him as a father who, despite past mistakes, was now willing to be present and give his children a life of comfort and opportunities. The strategy was clear: to convince the court and the public that he was a changed man and that the children would be better off in his care. In interviews, Lucas emphasized his desire for redemption, arguing that the children deserved to enjoy the resources he could provide, a life of opportunities that Laura might not be able to offer. On the other hand, Laura, even without Lucas's resources, was not willing to give up. She had the support of friends, neighbors, and the community, who knew her story and the unwavering dedication with which she had raised her children. People who had witnessed her daily struggle, who had seen her efforts and sacrifices up close, came together to help her tell her side of the story. On social media, photos and testimonials from neighbors who had known Laura since her pregnancy began circulating, showing her as a loving, devoted mother, willing to do anything for her children. In her defense, Laura argued that Lucas had made the decision to abandon her, that he had never been present in the children's lives, and that trying to force his way in now would only bring confusion and pain. She insisted that the children already had a stable and happy life that she had built with great effort, and that Lucas's money could never replace the love and security they felt by her side. Each of her appearances in court was met with applause and words of support from people who believed she had the right to decide what was best for her children. The media, too, was relentless. Every hearing was surrounded by reporters and cameras, with sensational headlines and expert analyses about what they dubbed the Battle of the Millionaire and the Warrior Mother. The case divided public opinion. Some sided with Lucas, arguing he was only trying to reclaim his role as a father and had the right to be part of his children's lives. But there was also a large number of people who stood with Laura, believing that Lucas, with his absence, had forfeited the right to interfere in the life she had built on her own. Tension in the hearings grew with each encounter. Lucas's lawyers tried to prove he was a father willing to do whatever it took to make up for lost time, while Laura's defense focused on proving he had never cared until he saw the children. Witnesses from both sides were called, and each session turned into a spectacle of accusations, tears, and emotional testimonies. In the midst of it all, Lucas began to realize that the battle was not only legal but also deeply emotional. The choices he had made in the past were now coming back full force, and despite his efforts to convince everyone he was a legitimate father, he started to question if he was doing the right thing. Laura, meanwhile, stood firm, determined to fight to the end to protect her children from the turmoil. The legal battle became a game of power, money, and determination, leaving an increasingly difficult question hanging in the air: who really had the right to decide the future of those four little ones? The trial had reached its most intense moment, the final confrontation between Lucas and Laura. The courtroom was packed, and the silence was almost tangible as Laura took the witness stand. She seemed calm, but anyone looking into her eyes could see the weight of years of struggle and sacrifice. Her attorney began asking questions, guiding her to publicly recount, for the first time, everything she had gone through since Lucas had left her. Laura took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was steady, but filled with an emotion she could barely contain. She told of the shock she felt upon discovering she was pregnant right after Lucas left, of the sleepless nights spent in fear and uncertainty, wondering how she would raise their children alone. She recalled the moment she found out she wasn't just expecting one child, but four, and the mix of joy and despair she felt as the magnitude of the responsibility ahead of her settled in. Her words poured out with raw honesty, hiding nothing, as the entire room listened in silence, captivated by the intensity of her story. She spoke about the financial struggles, the part-time job she had to take, the times she didn't know if she'd be able to pay the rent or put food on the table. She shared how each of her children was a miracle to her, the reason she got up every day and fought, even when it seemed impossible. "They are my life," she said, her voice breaking. "And I did everything I could to raise them with love, so they'd never feel abandoned. I never wanted them to know what it's like to be left behind." On the other side, Lucas felt each of her words like a knife. He sat still, but inside each account, each sacrifice she described, made him painfully aware of the impact of the choices he had made. For the first time, he was truly confronted with the reality of the life Laura had led while he was chasing success and wealth. The pain and resilience she displayed made him question everything he had defended until that moment. How could he have been so blind, so focused on himself, that he ignored what he had left behind? When his turn came to speak, Lucas, once so confident, was now shaken. He began to explain why he had chosen to leave, but the words failed him. He had believed he was doing what was best for himself, that he could return one day, and maybe everything would be fine. But now, looking at Laura, he realized just how selfish his decision had been, how much she had suffered alone while he built a life devoid of true meaning. "I was wrong," he said, his voice trembling, finally admitting something he had never had the courage to face, even within himself. "I thought I could live without looking back, but I was mistaken. I left you when you needed me most, and that's something I can never make right." He looked at Laura, seeing in her the strength he had underestimated, and felt the deep pain of having wasted the chance to share that life with her and their children. The jurors, the judge, and everyone in the room observed this moment with intensity, absorbing every exposed emotion. This was more than a legal battle. It was a reckoning between two people who, at one point, had loved each other, but whose choices had led them down opposite paths. Lucas finally understood that money, success, and status would never fill the void of not being there for the ones who truly mattered. On that decisive day in court, with emotions running high and all eyes on him, Lucas made an unexpected decision. Instead of continuing his fight for custody of the children, something within him shifted. He realized that what truly mattered wasn't legal recognition or the power that wealth could bring. What he deeply desired was to be part of Laura's life and the children's lives in a healthy and respectful way. With a heavy heart yet somehow lighter for finally having clarity, Lucas turned to Laura. His words came out in a whisper, but they were filled with sincerity. "Laura, I'm so sorry. I truly am sorry for everything I've done and for leaving you. I don't want to fight you anymore. I want to ask for your forgiveness." Laura looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and hope. It was the last thing she expected to hear at that moment. She had always wished for Lucas to acknowledge his role as a father, but she hadn't known that this would come with the surrender of their legal battle. The tension of the fight seemed to slowly dissolve, making room for something new. Lucas continued, "I don't want to be an intruder in your lives. I want to get closer to the kids, but in the right way. You are the true hero of this story. You've done everything for them, and I want to learn from you. I want to be a part of their lives while respecting the family you've created." Lucas's words touched Laura's heart in a way she couldn't have anticipated. Though still hurt by his past decisions, she began to see a different man before her, someone who finally seemed willing to take responsibility. Cautiously, she agreed that a new beginning was possible, but made it clear that the process would take time and that she would protect the children at all costs. After that day, Lucas gradually began to engage in the children's lives. Rather than showing up as a demanding or controlling father, he became a friend. He started attending school events, participating in birthday parties, and slowly getting closer to the kids. Lucas found joy in the little things, helping with homework, playing at the park, and even learning to cook some of their favorite recipes. He made sure their relationship was based on trust and love, not obligation. Laura, for her part, watched Lucas's transformation with a cautious yet hopeful gaze. She noticed how he was genuinely trying to be part of the children's lives, and little by little, the walls she had built began to crumble. Lucas was not just there as a father trying to make up for lost time. He had become a positive presence, someone who helped her and in some way, shared the responsibility. Over time, they began to communicate more openly, sharing laughs and moments that had previously seemed impossible. Lucas had become a support for the family, and though there were still hurts from the past, there was also a sense that a new chapter was forming. He recognized that Laura was the true strength behind the family, and this admiration drove him to be a better man. The children, sensing the new dynamic, began to accept Lucas into their lives naturally. They saw a father who was there out of love, not obligation, and this brought joy not only to Lucas but also to Laura, who started to believe that forgiveness and reconciliation could be possible.